Welcome to our channel with new episode. An actor uses his body as his main tool, and that doesn't really depend on what kind of role he plays. Charlton Heston, known for his strong screen presence, once received the Herschel Humanitarian Award. He proudly accepted it and famously said, "From my cold, dead hands." He had acted in over 100 films and even won an Oscar. He wasn't just a movie star, he also marched with Martin Luther King Jr. to support civil rights. He once spoke of the brave men who signed the Declaration of Independence, saying they knew they could die for what they believed in. In his final interview, Charlton Heston said something that left Peter Jennings speechless. At the age of 77, Heston, who had played iconic roles like Moses, admitted that his life was coming to an end. Sitting beside his wife of 60 years, he revealed that his memory was starting to fade. The crew was so shocked that they stopped filming. Nobody knew what to say. After all, this was a man who had once been a powerful and confident voice in America. He was born John Charles Carter on October 4, 1923, in Cook County, Illinois. His birth certificate was filed 11 days later under the name Charlton Carter. He himself wrote in his autobiography that he was born in Wilmette, but most official records say Evanston. This caused some confusion about his birthplace. He grew up in the quiet woods of St. Helens, Michigan, where he spent most of his time hunting and fishing. He once called himself a skinny hick from the woods. By the 1930 census, his name was already listed as Charlton J. Carter, even though people usually say he changed it later. When he was 10, his parents divorced. His mother later married a man named Chester Heston, and Charlton took his last name. Many people thought Charlton came from his mother's maiden name, but it actually came from his grandmother, Marion Charlton. His mother and aunt had been adopted by their grandfather and took his last name to escape a difficult past. As he became more famous, people who knew him well still called him Chuck. At 17, in 1941, he appeared in his first film, Peer Gynt. It was a silent film, which was unusual because talking movies had been around for more than a decade. His younger brother Alan had a small part too. The film wasn't a big Hollywood project, but it was artistic and used Norwegian music to stay close to the original story. One critic later said the silence gave it an emotional feeling, even though by then, silent films were considered outdated. That same year, he started attending Northwestern University. He met Lydia Clark in a theater class. He was shy, worked hard, and didn't have much money. He ran elevators at night and took whatever jobs he could. Despite all that, he and Lydia quickly fell in love. They got married on March 17, 1944, in Greensboro, North Carolina. Their marriage lasted 64 years, until his death in 2008. They had 2 children, Fraser and Holly. Even when work kept them apart, their love stayed strong. Heston once said he loved Lydia more after 9 years of marriage than he did on their wedding day. His television career began on March 15, 1949, when he appeared on Suspense. A few months later, on June 15, 1949, he debuted on Studio One. That show gave him a chance to play deep, emotional roles. He played characters like Edward Rochester in Jane Eyre, Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, and even Macbeth. These roles helped him grow as an actor. CBS gave Studio One more funding than other shows at the time, and while some people thought Heston seemed stiff, others saw something special in his voice and presence. By 1955, the show was getting over 500 scripts each week. Heston was becoming a serious and respected actor. In 1950, he took on 2 important projects. He played Mark Antony in a low-budget version of Julius Caesar. He was the only actor who got paid for that role. The director was David Bradley, a childhood friend. That same year, he got his first big break in Hollywood with the film Dark City. He played a bitter gambler named Danny Haley. Heston was only 25 at the time. The movie wasn't a big success, but director Cecil B. DeMille noticed him. In 1952, DeMille gave him a role in The Greatest Show on Earth, where he played Brad, a tough circus manager who had a softer side. Critics liked how he brought a Bogart-style toughness to the part, and the film went on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. In 1954, he acted in 2 adventure films. The first was The Naked Jungle, where he played a plantation owner fighting off army ants and dealing with a tense marriage. The director used amazing special effects to bring the ants to life, and critics pointed out how bold it was to show real tension between Heston and his co-star, Eleanor Parker. Soon after that, he went to Peru to film Secret of the Incas. It was the first big Hollywood movie filmed at Machu Picchu. The small crew worked with hundreds of local extras. Heston played a treasure hunter named Harry Steele, and the role later inspired the character Indiana Jones. The movie also led to a rise in tourism to Peru. Later that year, Cecil B. DeMille started working on casting for the Ten Commandments. At first, he wanted actor William Boyd, who played Hopalong Cassidy, but Boyd said no because of his TV work. DeMille also considered actors like Jeff Chandler, Dan Daly, Kirk Douglas, and Rock Hudson. The final decision came when DeMille received a sculpture of Michelangelo's Moses from the Israeli government. He thought Charlton Heston looked a lot like the statue, and that helped him decide. Even then, DeMille had doubts. He wrote in his diary that Heston seemed too serious and not that attractive, but he gave him the role anyway. There was one more surprise. Heston's son Fraser had just been born, and a producer suggested using him as baby Moses in the famous basket scene. Fraser was only 3 months old at the time. Heston not only played Moses but also did the voice of God in the burning bush scenes. By 1956, he wasn't just an actor anymore, he was the face of biblical movies and one of Hollywood's biggest stars. When MGM was planning Ben-Hur, they knew it would be their biggest and most expensive movie. But choosing the lead actor was difficult. Charlton Heston wasn't their first choice, or even close. They first offered the role to Burt Lancaster, but he thought the script was boring and even disrespectful to Christianity. Paul Newman also said no because his previous biblical movie had flopped, and he didn't want to wear a Roman costume. Marlon Brando also refused. The studio kept looking, even considering Italian actors who didn't speak English. Finally, director William Wyler suggested Charlton Heston. He had already proven himself as Moses, and he had the voice, the presence, and the physical strength to play a Roman charioteer. The film's production was huge. The chariot race alone cost $1 million to make. It took 5 weeks to shoot the famous chariot race in the film, and the entire process stretched across 3 months, covering more than 200 miles of real track. Charlton Heston began training for it as soon as he arrived in Rome. He practiced every day for 3 hours, learning how to drive a chariot, control the horses, and master the tight turns. The dirt would often fly up into his face, so he wore special contact lenses to protect his eyes. One of the most unforgettable moments in the race scene was actually a real accident. Stuntman Joe Cannett, the son of legendary stunt coordinator Yakima Cannett, was thrown into the air and slammed to the ground during a jump. He injured his chin but survived. The director used this real footage in the final film, editing it together with close-up shots of Heston climbing back into the chariot. That moment became one of the most iconic scenes in the movie. The production used 78 specially trained horses from Yugoslavia and Sicily. Heston's team had Andalusian horses, while other teams used Lipizzaners. When Ben-Hur was released in 1959, it became a huge hit. At the 32nd Academy Awards, the film won 11 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Charlton Heston. This record held for nearly 40 years until Titanic tied it in 1997. It was Heston's first and only competitive Oscar win, but it changed the course of his career. After this, he became Hollywood's top choice for epic historical roles. Critics saw him as a symbol of an era when Hollywood focused on serious films with heroic characters. After Ben-Hur, Heston starred in more epic roles. In 1961, he played El Cid, and in 1965, he played Michelangelo in The Agony and the Ecstasy. That same year, he portrayed John the Baptist in The Greatest Story Ever Told. Film critic Roger Ebert once said that Heston starred in at least 3 films that almost everyone ends up watching at some point: Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, and Planet of the Apes. Despite his fame, Heston made some unexpected choices. In 1960, he turned down a major studio film with Marilyn Monroe called Let's Make Love so he could act on Broadway. He wanted to work with Laurence Olivier, who was directing a play called The Tumbler by Ben W. Levi. The play opened in Boston but didn't do well. It moved to New York and closed after only 5 performances. Time magazine called it harrowingly pretentious. Even though it was a failure, Heston said it was worth it. He told a columnist that he learned more from Olivier in 6 weeks than he ever could have on his own. Later that year, he starred in The Wreck of the Mary Dear with Gary Cooper, a sea thriller based on a novel by Hammond Innes. The film started as a mystery but turned into a courtroom drama halfway through. Critics didn't like the shift in tone, and one reviewer said the ending was its weakest part. Still, the film made money. MGM Records showed it earned over $2.8 million worldwide, making a small profit after its $2.6 million budget. Heston later said the screenplay didn't capture the novel's power and blamed the director, Michael Anderson, for mishandling the courtroom scenes. In 1961, Heston returned to epic films with El Cid, which was filmed over 9 months in Spain. Behind the scenes, tensions were high. Heston and co-star Sophia Loren did not get along. Their dislike for each other was no secret in the film industry. Though they had strong on-screen chemistry, they constantly argued off-camera. When producer Samuel Bronston later tried to cast them together again in The Fall of the Roman Empire, Heston refused, which some believe contributed to the financial problems that later hit Bronston's studio. El Cid was a huge box office success. The costumes and weapons were authentic, and even the Spanish army participated as extras. The film made Bronston a lot of money, allowing him to produce more epic films. But Heston began to feel stuck. He had already played Moses and Ben-Hur, and now another legendary hero. He worried he was being typecast in these larger-than-life roles. Then, in 1968, Heston made a bold move by starring in Planet of the Apes, which completely changed how science fiction was viewed. The makeup process was intense. It took up to 7 hours to apply and 3 hours to remove. Actors had to start their day at 2 a.m. and work until 10 p.m. Makeup artist John Chambers solved many challenges by using foam rubber and breathable paint. Filming began on May 21, 1967. The studio spent $345,000 on makeup but told the media it was $1 million. Shooting was tough. Actors wore heavy prosthetics in the desert heat and had to drink their meals through straws to avoid ruining the makeup. Off-camera, the cast unintentionally separated into groups based on the type of ape they played: gorillas with gorillas, orangutans with orangutans. One cinematographer built a metal sled to film astronauts sliding down sandy slopes. Around this time, a satirical article falsely claimed Heston made inappropriate comments to a stagehand in May 1967. It even joked that she had nightmares of him in his ape costume. The story was entirely made up, mocking cancel culture by mimicking real news stories. In 1971, Heston starred in The Omega Man, based on the novel I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. He played a man alone in a world destroyed by a pandemic. The film made $4 million in the US and Canada. Matheson said it was so different from his book that he didn't care anymore, but the film later became a cult classic. Director Tim Burton said it was his favorite desert island movie and the first film he saw with funny action lines. Next came Soylent Green in 1973, set in a dystopian New York City in 2022. The film explored overpopulation and climate change, making it one of the earliest movies to tackle those issues. The twist, that the food product Soylent Green is made of people, was not in the original book. Screenwriter Stanley Greenberg added it, and the author, Harry Harrison, disliked the change. The film's cinematographer used green filters to give the movie a sick and toxic look. In 1974, Heston starred in Earthquake, which featured 141 stunt performers, a record at the time. Heston was 50 years old and still performed many of his own stunts. The camera system shook the entire frame to mimic real earthquakes. During filming, one stunt person was knocked out in a flood scene, and another was injured during an elevator crash. In 1972, Heston directed Antony and Cleopatra, a project he had long dreamed of. He originally wanted Orson Welles to direct, but when Welles declined, Heston took over. Critics hated the film. The naval battle scenes reused old footage from Ben-Hur and looked cheap. Heston gave himself long close-ups and ignored pacing, which hurt the film's reception. Heston didn't always hold the conservative views many remember him for. In the 1950s, he was a dedicated Democrat. He supported Adlai Stevenson in 1956 and backed John F. Kennedy in 1960. By the early 1960s, he became deeply involved in civil rights. On August 28, 1963, he marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Washington, D.C., leading the group of artists that day. Around 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. Heston later called it the most important moment of the movement and described Dr. King as a modern-day Moses. At the time, Heston knew speaking out could hurt his career, but he didn't care. He believed democracy only worked when people stood up for it. After the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Dr. King in 1968, Heston even called for stricter gun control laws. But in the 1970s, his views started shifting. By the late 1990s, he had joined the NRA and became its president in 1998. Membership grew to over 4 million during his leadership. In 2000, he famously raised a rifle above his head at a convention and said, "From my cold dead hands." That same year, he gave a strong speech at Harvard Law School. He warned students that they were becoming the most politically silenced generation since the American Revolution. He said fear had stopped people from speaking freely and challenged them to resist, just as Dr. King had done decades earlier. In August 2000, Heston revealed he had entered rehab earlier that year. He admitted to drinking too much white wine, especially during flights and events. He wasn't stumbling or slurring, but he recognized it had become a problem. His wife Lydia and their son encouraged him to seek help. Charlton and Lydia had been married since March 17, 1944. Her father once said the marriage would only last 2 weeks, but it lasted 64 years. They were different. He was punctual but messy, she was neat but often late. Rumors of cheating surfaced over the years, but Heston always denied them. He said he had loved Lydia since he was 17 and never wanted to lose her. They had a rule: never go to sleep before resolving an argument. In 1998, doctors discovered Heston had prostate cancer during hip surgery. He was 73. It was caught early and wasn't life-threatening, but he delayed treatment to finish filming and support political campaigns. Once filming ended, he started radiation therapy 5 days a week at 7 a.m., then went to work. He didn't miss a beat. In 2001, he announced he was cancer-free. On August 9, 2002, Heston recorded a personal video message revealing he had been diagnosed with symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. He wanted to tell the public himself, without a crowd or script. He said, "I may not be able to say goodbye later, so I'm saying it now." His voice was calm, and his presence still powerful. He quoted Shakespeare's The Tempest from memory, holding on to the craft he had devoted his life to. In December 2002, he gave his final televised interview. His wife Lydia stayed by his side. He spoke slowly and sometimes forgot words, but he still understood what was happening. When asked about the illness, he said, "The problem is not for you, it's for those around you." He didn't fear forgetting. He feared not being able to say goodbye. Charlton Heston lived with Alzheimer's for more than 5 years. On April 5, 2008, he died at home in Beverly Hills at the age of 84. The cause was complications from the disease. Though his voice had gone silent, tributes poured in. President George W. Bush, who had awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2003, called him a man of character and integrity. Nancy Reagan said he was a true hero, both on and off screen. His funeral was held on April 12, 2008, at the church he had attended since the early 1980s. About 250 people came, including Hollywood stars and political leaders like Nancy Reagan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Olivia de Havilland, Tom Selleck, Oliver Stone, and Christian Bale. After the service, Heston was cremated, and his ashes were returned to his family, the people he had loved and protected for 64 years. Like and subscribe our channel.